An hour north of the line dividing the U.S. and Canada, in a small town called Knowlton, the cross-border relationship feels fragile.
We love the American people, but we're also defensive about our economy and want to support Canadian business, which we feel might be under attack right now.
Having family in the United States as well makes things a little precarious right now.
Since President Trump imposed new tariffs on imports from Canada, the relationship has soured. Canadian imports from the U.S. are down, and the nation slipped from being the largest buyer of U.S. goods to number 2, behind Mexico.
Canadians know that our old, comfortable assumptions that our geography and alliance memberships automatically conferred prosperity and security, that assumption is no longer valid. We are rapidly diversifying abroad. The past few days, we've concluded new strategic partnerships with China and Qatar.
Although Carney is optimistic about Canada's economic agenda, February's jobs report paints a bleaker picture. The country shed the most jobs in more than 4 years last month, sending unemployment up to 6.7% from 6.5% in January.
We're all going to lose around 2% of our GDP because of the new trade environment. That includes the United States. When I say 2%, for somebody, it's 100% of their livelihood.
Stephen Poloz succeeded Mark Carney as governor of the Bank of Canada and is now a special advisor at Canadian business law firm Osler.
Let's talk a little bit more about the loss. Where do we see it now?
Oh, you see it in autos, you see it in steel, you see it in aluminum, you see it in copper, and you see it in the forestry sector. These are sectors that are deemed, really strategically important.
As U.S. tariffs weighed on Canadian exports for much of the year, real GDP contracted in 2 of the 4 quarters of 2025, and for the year increased by just 1.7%, the slowest pace of annual growth since the economy shrank during COVID in 2020.
But right now, you still encounter that belligerence at the grocery store, looking for the thing not grown in the United States. Or, well, look, Mexican vegetable versus U.S., California. People are still doing that.
Some Canadians say they feel betrayed by the U.S., with more than half of respondents in a political poll saying the country is no longer a reliable ally.
Life here before this particular round was wonderful. We had a great relationship. I guess it was February of last year when everything changed.
Louise Penny is a Canadian journalist turned author. When she was on tour last year, Penny decided to redirect her U.S. tour dates back to Canada in protest of Trump's tariffs. She's also refusing to return to the U.S. until the trade war is over, a trend that's becoming increasingly common amongst Canadians.
The decision to not tour in the United States was obvious. It wasn't even a decision. There was no way I was going to go into a country that had declared war on us, any more than I would imagine Americans if Canada had done the same thing to you. But we sell merchandise here, and the vast majority of it went into the United States, now no longer. Not because people don't want it, but because the tariffs are ruinous. They can't buy a $30 mug and have $50 worth of tariffs put on it. So we've lost huge amounts because of the tariffs, and we're small. I can only imagine what larger corporations in Canada are suffering.
What are CEOs saying? What are they thinking at this point?
Well, they remain very cautious, I would say, in the areas where trade matters the most. They're essentially still frozen, and they're the type would be just keep the lights on, do our maintenance spend, keep our powder dry.
The truth is we need to be more competitive. We need to be more productive. This is not a unique problem to Canada.
Goldy Hyder is the CEO of the Canada Business Council.
Prime Minister Carney always likes to emphasize that when it comes to the marginal effective tax rate, the Canadian price is Canadian rate is the lowest in the G7. Those kinds of things inspire confidence for businesses to be able to deploy capital. Otherwise, you're going to see a lot of chilling and freezing of the capital.
Although small business owners and some industry CEOs are feeling the pinch, some have a more nuanced view.
All those policies are working, more so than I've ever seen in my 40-year career. That's why I'd like Canada to endorse it and do the same thing.
Barry Zekelman is the chief executive of Zekelman Industries, a steel pipe and tube manufacturer. He sees the relationship from both sides of the border, having started his business in Windsor, Ontario, now having his headquarters in Chicago, and producing his products in both countries.
How do the tariffs affect your business in Canada?
Tremendously. I'm paying massive tariffs to ship products from Canada into the U.S.
Can you put some kind of a dollar figure or percentage figure on what you're having to pay?
We're having to pay roughly, almost $250, $275 a ton, U.S. So, I'm paying $6-7 million a month in tariffs. It's huge. We've got to eat it. I've got to keep this plant running. I'm trying. My U.S. customers need the product. I'm manufacturing more and more in the U.S. We've upped our production there tremendously. I mean, if you had to compare Canada to the U.S. is booming. I have never seen more robust demand. So the policies are working over there.
So the back and forth on tariffs, even though a lot's covered under USMCA, has put a chill on the Canadian economy.
Yeah. We need to resolve it, all right? I understand Prime Minister Carney, and he's our Prime Minister, so I've got to stand behind the leadership of our country. But we have to have a healthy trading relationship with the U.S. It is not going to be replaced by other countries. We can't just keep poking them in the eye and telling them we don't need you, and standing there at Davos pretending that these mid-market or mid countries are going to band together against the U.S. Every one of them's in the back door trying to sign a deal with the U.S. It's not going to happen. It's the greatest economy in the world. It's the market that everybody in the world wants to be in. And we're right next door to it with the longest border in the world next to it and biggest trading relationship. And we're saying, oh, we're going to move on? That doesn't work. That doesn't hold water. When you sit there and oh, we're going to make it the 51st state. Look, people got to relax and people have to calm down.
You don't feel insulted by the president as a Canadian?
No, I've got thicker skin. I mean, you can't get insulted like that and turn that into a global trading fight. Read in between the lines. I'm telling you, I believe with everything in my heart that if President Donald Trump, had the right relationship with Canada, a fair trading relationship, and resolve some of these issues, he'd put his arms around Canada and hug them and welcome them into the family because he would feel secure that we've got a family that's working together for the greater good of North America against many bad actors who are bad for the U.S. and bad for Canada.
Like Zekelman, Hyder says it might be hard to separate business from personal when it comes to cross-border relations, but in the long run, it might be for the best.
Canadians have the right to respond the way that they have. Look, it's emotional response, but I will say this about Canadians. We can separate emotion from reason. We ran a survey not too long ago which shows that over 80% of Canadians feel very strongly that this agreement is good, that it's working, and that it should be reviewed and renewed. I mean, we have to some extent taken it for granted that we share this border with the largest economy in the world, and we've been a little bit comfortable. I have said this to many Americans, particularly in the administration. It is not in your interest to have a weak Canada and a weak Mexico. Let's be clear, we are a very lucky group of countries. This is not India, Pakistan, or China, Taiwan, or North Korea, or South Korea. We are very fortunate to live in a neighborhood where we find a way to work together.
Half of Canadians believe it's still important to preserve Canada's trade agreement with the U.S. and Mexico, the USMCA, or CUSMA, as the Canadians call it. It's up for review in July of this year, begging the question, what comes next?
As CUSMA gets renegotiated and as the tariff situation goes on, there's been talk of Mexico and Canada sort of reaching over the United States and concluding some type of their own agreement. Do you see anything like that happening?
Right now, I think we can both kind of treat as, you can invest in Mexico and that gives you access to the United States market. That's basically what USMCA kind of does. And same thing in Canada. And so that's where investment comes, the platform for trade in North America. Could it be the other way around or just, as you say, go over? Well, of course it can, because that's the nature of the current agreement. We'll see how the CUSMA or USMCA renegotiations go. But frankly, they could go nowhere.
I do not like the fact at all that there are these trade tensions between Canada and the U.S. I would absolutely love for this temperature to come down. I think that these two countries should have a robust trading relationship between the two of them. I think that there's a lot of things that Canada can offer to the U.S., and I think there's a lot of things the U.S. can offer to Canada. And I think that they need to get to the issues that are contentious, deal with them, and move on. I mean, if you talk to any Canadian, they're upset. Their pride's been hurt, and they feel they're standing up to what they perceive as a bully.
I think it will be an important component of his legacy if we're able to review and renew it and allow it to continue to bring about the prosperity and the growth and the security that it has offered, for decades now. What we cannot have is an agreement that some have called a zombie agreement. It exists, but it doesn't really mean anything. It just kind of perpetuates out there in the abyss. That's not constructive. And let me be clear about one thing that your viewers of more than anywhere else in the world would understand. Capital doesn't have a heart. Canadians like Americans. I think Americans like Canadians, and we'll get through this.